So you like the idea of space elves but with a bit of naughty, eh? I getcha. Well, I'm your narrator Benji, and this is Warhammer 40k. Today's topic of discussion is how to get you from 0 to 25 power, aka 500 points, of Drukhari. And for those of you with a confused look on your face right now, you should know that power is used as a measuring stick for a unit's value in open and narrative play, the casual and thematic version of the game. And then points are used primarily because of their added granularity in matched play, the more regimented and by extension competitive way to get your minis to the table. This breakpoint will mean you'll have your own fully fledged combat patrol army. But future videos will guide you through the process of crafting your own incursion, strike force and ultimately onslaught forces. So, whilst you might already know that Drukhari are effectively dark elves in space, they are also broken down into 3 sub-factions. The mobile but shooty Cabal, the mobile but melee specialist Witch Cult, and the not so mobile and brawly Homunculus Coven. The problem we've got is we only have time today to guide you through 2 different builds, and so we opted to A, abuse the current codex and make a real space raiders army that combines the 3 of these sub-factions into one jack of all trades detachment, and B, pick the Witch Cult as our other choice by virtue of them very roughly being a compromise between the remaining 2 choices. Not quite middle of the road, but close enough. Never fear, if there's enough demand, we will of course play fair's fair and embark on this journey again with the remaining sub-factions sometime in the future. So with the prologue out the way, we shall commence with the Real Space Raiders first. This will of course be the choice for you if you're all about variety of models, and on the surface at least will give you the opportunity to sample a bit of everything the Dark Eldari have to offer. Normally at this point we'd go through each battlefield role one at a time and talk a bit about the units we're including, but the nature of the Raiders detachment dictates we'll talk about each of the 3 mandatory HQs and their associated troop choices in that order. First up is the Archon, the HQ representing the Cabal, and which incidentally has to be your warlord in this type of detachment. With only short range weaponry, this guy, unlike a few of his mates, is more than handy in a close up tussle, and also fulfills the captain's buff of giving rerolls to hit rolls of 1 to pretty much any unit within 6 inches. This guy is good shizzle in melee, and if you make him a master, which is something we'll touch on a bit later, he becomes a bit tasty indeed. Accompanying Mr. Archon from the Cabal is a unit of 10 Cabal-like warriors. Again, as is the theme with this detachment, you need at least one of these units of rank and file. They are the very epitome of vanilla Drukhari, very flimsy, albeit with a 4-up armor save, but conversely potent at medium range shooting, almost always wounding on a 4-up by virtue of their poisoned weapons. These are cheap as chips with plenty of comparative offensive output. Our Witch Cult HQ is the aptly named Succubus, a short range and melee specialist that confers a lieutenant-like buff of giving rerolls to wound rolls of 1, and who's even more of a melee monster than the Archon, with a straight up 4-up invuln save rather than the 2-up works until it fails invuln that the Archon gets. Like her troop counterparts, she'll also gain access to combat drugs, which will increase their base stats. Speaking of which, the Succubus comes tethered with a unit of 10 Witches, another frightening unit of melee and short range goodness, whose invuln save is a precarious 6-up at range but increases to 4-up in melee combat. Once these get up close and personal, they can tally up an impressive number of attacks. Which leaves us with the Homunculus Coven HQ, the imaginatively titled Homunculus, the most mutated of Eldari that we've talked about so far, and the most durable of the bunch. Not only do they have an increased toughness for themselves, but they buff the toughness characteristic of core units within 6 inches by 1. Not only that, but you'll find he's also useful to have around Homunculus monsters and grotesques. He's also packing a bunch of different melee weapons, one or more of which should always be useful against a given unit. His troop buddies are a unit of only 5 racks, who will rock an impressive toughness 5 standing side by side with their daddy Homunculus. Their pitiful 6-up save being somewhat mitigated by a 5-up feel no pain, ignore wounds type roll. It is that durability that's supposed to make up for their relative lack of mobility. Although both of these units are still rocking a movement of 7 inches, so not exactly slouches. Either way, their base war gear sees them sacrificing less attacks for a higher chance to wound. Swings and roundabouts. So there you have an okay, we cheated 26 power, but only 425 points of real space raiders. I think it was too important to get the bare bones of this type of detachment down on paper, and if you're playing open or narrative play, then tell your opponent to get a grip or let them spend an extra power on anything they want. The troop unit sizes on display really are like butter spread too thin, but there's still plenty of bodies on the table to do some low point game wrecking. This list will throw you in at the deep end in terms of learning all the obsessions, aka buffs that each sub-faction receives, but it will absolutely give you a small flavour of what each one has to offer. Oh, and feel free to take a unit of 10 racks instead if you're playing with points, as you've got plenty of extra at your disposal. And so we move to the Army of Witch Cult. That at this point's level isn't going to deviate much from what you've already seen of this sub-faction from the other list. But rest assured, as the breakpoints increase, the individuality and personality that they bring will come more and more to the fore. So to the HQ slot we have a, you guessed it, succubus. But outside of what makes this little lady such a powerhouse in combat, we can also talk a little bit more about upgrading HQs to masters. For either 1 power or between 15 to 20 points, we can upgrade each of the 3 HQs we've talked about so far today, and give them special abilities and access to a unique relic and warlord trait that are by and large well worth their cost. The succubus, for example, can consolidate a further 3 inches, and that can be away from an enemy model. And the Dancer's Edge relic blade increases her swinging strength to an uber useful 5 and does 2 damage a pop. A very nice upgrade. Her warlord trait is a doozy as well, as she can increase her attack characteristic to 3 plus the number of enemy models within 2 inches. Now, I don't need to tell you that 32mm bases or no, that could get quite tasty. Onto the troop slots then, we also have an upgraded unit of 10 witches. Now, similar to the master upgrades we just talked about, so long as you have a master, you can also nominate 1 unit of associated troops per to be their favoured retinue. For the witches, they become named Hecatrix Blood Brides and rock a 2-up weapon skill, a bump to their leadership of 1, and an extra AP of 3 on wound rolls of 6 instead of the normal 1. Again, well worth the points, with the only downside being the unit size maxes out at 10. Accompanying the Blood Brides is a conventional unit of 20. Yes, you heard that right, 20 witches. Now they're mobile, but they're still pretty squishy, so the more meat in the way, the more likely they are to wreak some carnage. As an added bonus, you get some real war gear upgrade potential when you take the unit in multiples of 10. Which leaves us just enough room for a dedicated transport. Yes, in a small point game, we are bringing an open-topped raider. Our blood brides are too precious not to want to deliver them straight to the doorstep of an unwitting enemy unit. And with a convenient transport capacity of 11, you may as well deliver them with the succubus for one elite unit of melee murdering. That's without mentioning that the raider happens to have a dark lance on board. So if there are any high toughness, multiple wound targets roaming at this level, then what happens next for your opponent might hurt. So there you have what feels like a more abridged version of a list of this size, totaling up to another cheaty-weety 26 power. As you can imagine, with potentially only 2 models starting on the battlefield, with those embarked on the raider, there isn't a great deal of subtlety and guile about the game plan. Point the 2 things at the target, move quickly and slice and dice. A considerable oversimplification of a game of 40k if ever I've heard of one. But with that, we move towards the close of this here chapter of the book, and this is just the start of something quite winning indeed. I really do like what the new codex has done in terms of opening up the army building space for Drukhari. And as I said at the outset, if you want me to explore the Cabal and Homunculus Covens, then please let me know in the comments. Stay tuned for more Drukhari army building in the near future. Alas, this video is over.